America and Russia have entered into this new unholy alliance. Trump proclaims himself to be pro-Ukraine merely as an act, while in reality, Trump's actions are going to lead to the death of Ukraine, and in turn, the expansion of a neo-fascist Russian empire, trying to build back what the Tsar started. In today's video, I want to explain why Trump supports Russia, and why, even though I am pro-Ukraine, I think that realistically speaking, Ukraine is going to lose the war. Trump has been pro-Russia since 2016. In 2016, Trump came out and said that Russia interfered or had some interference in the 2016 election. When Trump was asked if Russia is still interfering with the US after the election, Trump said no. And then when they asked Trump why he said no, Trump lied about how he was no longer taking any questions. To quote, earlier in the day when asked by ABC News, Cecilia Vega, if Russia is still targeting the US, President Trump replied, "Thank you very much. No." "No? You don't believe that to be the case?" Vega followed up. "No," Trump said. Later Wednesday, Press Secretary Sarah Sanders claimed that when the president answered no, he was saying that he couldn't answer questions and not actually saying no to the question about Russian targeting. Quote, "I had a chance to speak with the president after his comments, and the president said thank you very much and was saying no to answering questions," Sanders says. But the president was speaking directly to Vega in offering his no response, and even went on to take other reporters' questions immediately after the exchange. I definitely find it strange that Trump would come out and say that Russia interfered with a US election, and then afterwards defend Russia. Now, besides the fact that all of the people who surround Trump are pro-Russia, like Trump Jr., who wants to end all aid to Ukraine, and RFK Jr., who believes that America started the war in Ukraine for some reason. But the reason why Trump personally supports Russia is a combination of reasons. Trump is against things like NATO and other US alliances. Trump thinks that Western leaders who are democratically elected are weak and ineffective, while thinking that authoritarian dictators like Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and others are good because they are strong and strength is good, even though they aren't strong, more so of corrupt. Trump hates Zelensky because he's a liberal and because he believes in all these pro-Russian conspiracy theories about Zelensky. And Trump deeply believes in pro-Russian propaganda and their talking points, as in Ukraine stole millions of dollars from the US, though the quote-unquote money that the US has given to Ukraine isn't actually money, but rather just old military equipment. Trump tried to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. He tried to expand his businesses in post-Soviet Russia, and Trump bought the Miss Universe pageant to Moscow, a deal financed by a Russian billionaire known as Aris Algorov. In an interview, Trump says that the EU is quote-unquote a foe. Meanwhile, he says that Russia is a foe, but only in certain aspects. But it seems like he's downplaying Russia while also being strongly against the EU and NATO countries. Trump also praises dictators like Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping, who I think it's important to say aren't actual socialists or Marxists, but rather just authoritarian state capitalists. And Trump even said that North Korean people support Kim Jong-un and that it makes Kim Jong-un a good leader. To quote a Vox article, I don't want to talk about it specifically, but we've given him, he's gonna be happy, his country does love him, his people, you see the fervor, they have a great fervor. Trump said they're gonna put it together, and I think they're going to end up with a very strong country and a country who has people. They are so hardworking, so industrious. I think if you look at South Korea someday, maybe in the not too distant future, it will be something like that. North Korea ranks 167 out of 167 countries in the Economic Democracy Index, 174 out of 176 in Transparency International Corruption's ranking, and 180 out of 180 in the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom. Human Rights Watch says it remains one of the most repressive authoritarian states in the world, with inhumane detention and forced labor imposed on its people by the Kim regime. But what does this have to do with Ukraine? Well, if Trump is praising North Korea and its leader, and considering that Russia, although not as extreme, is an authoritarian regime that is engaging in imperialism, it shows that Trump has a clear preference towards authoritarian, anti-West nations, seeing them as strong, which would then make sense on why Trump supports Russia and is trying to end all aid to Ukraine, and forcing Ukraine into entering a ceasefire that Russia isn't going to agree to help Russia win the war faster. Because if Ukraine isn't fighting Russia because of the ceasefire, then that gives Russia an advantage in its invasion. Trump also hates Zelensky personally because he's a liberal, democratically elected president, but also because he views Zelensky as corrupt. To quote CBS, the phone call lasted approximately half an hour. The two leaders spoke through interpreters. My conversation with the official only lasted a few minutes, and as a result, I only received highlights. The president has asserted that it's all started in Ukraine, referring to the allegations of foreign interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election and the subsequent investigation into Trump's campaign contact with Russian individuals. The president asked Zelensky to locate the CrowdStrike server and turn it over to the United States, claiming that CrowdStrike is a quote-unquote Ukrainian company. Note that this appears to be a reference to the DNC server from which Russian hackers stole data, and emails from that were subsequently leaked in mid-2016. The DNC hired cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike to do the forensic analysis, which informed the FBI's investigation. It is not clear what the president was referring to when he claimed that CrowdStrike is a Ukrainian company. One of its own co-founders was born in Moscow. The president told Zelensky that he would be sending his personal lawyer from New York, Mayor Rudy, to Ukraine soon, and requested that Zelensky meet with him. Zelensky reluctantly agreed that if Giuliani traveled to Ukraine, he would see him. The president urged Zelensky not to fire Ukrainian prosecutor General Yuri Sento, who the president claimed was doing a good job. Luke Sento had spearheaded various politicalized investigations, including on the Burisma holding and an alleged Ukrainian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Lutsenko is widely reviled in Ukraine, and Zelensky has pledged to fire him, but he has been unable to secure approval from the legislature. The president stated that he wanted Attorney General William Barr to speak with Zelensky as soon as possible. Note, it was not clear whether this conversation was reference to the CrowdStrike or the investigations of the Bidens. The president reiterated his concerns that Zelensky was surrounded by people who were enemies of the president, including bad oligarchs. The president did not raise security assistance, according to the official. Zelensky demurred in response to most of the president's requests. Not only does Trump think that Zelensky is corrupt, but he also thinks that it was actually Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. To quote a PBS article, the server that the intelligence community overwhelmingly concluded that was hacked by the Russians, the server containing Democratic Party information from the Democratic National Convention and the president. However, it has been long resented the idea of the Russians got involved in his favor. Instead, he embraced this theory that it was the Ukrainians who were trying to help out Clinton, who may have had something to do with this server. And in fact, William, as you pointed out, this is the favor he asked Zelensky for. Let's look at that partial transcript from that call with the president. Zelensky. President Trump said, "I would like you to find out what happened with the whole situation with Ukraine." They said CrowdStrike the server. They say Ukraine has it. Also, the president brought up in a press conference or an availability in October. Basically, what happened is that in 2016, the DNC was hacked by Russia because Russia was trying to help Trump win, which is also a reason why Trump loves Russia. And Trump blames it all on Ukraine because he believes in pro-Russian conspiracy theories, which is a part of the reason why Trump supports Russia. Now, Ukraine has been losing the war since 2023 when Ukraine failed to make a major counteroffensive, and the reason why Ukraine lost the 2023 counteroffensive is because for a long time the GOP was blocking all aid to Ukraine, though eventually aid was unblocked and there was a vote that brought aid back to Ukraine, but it was too late. And because Ukraine lost the 2023 counteroffensive, that puts Ukraine in a bad position. Not to mention the fact that even though from 2024 to 2025, Ukraine made an incursion into the Kursk Oblast of Russia in order to give Ukraine leverage. Since March 31st, Ukraine lost full control of it. Ukraine is also severely lacking in manpower and equipment. Trump pressured Ukraine into entering a ceasefire which lasted for 30 days and temporarily ended aid to Ukraine. However, Ukraine followed the ceasefire and Russia still attacked Ukraine, and Trump continued aid to Ukraine because it agreed to the ceasefire. But the problem is that aid to Ukraine is most likely not going to continue. And when America does, the West is not going to support Ukraine because the European Union hasn't given Ukraine that much aid. All in all, Trump wants Russia to win because he's delusional. And although I think that the future of Ukraine is going to be quite painful, no empire lasts forever. And one day this current Russian empire will collapse and Ukraine will be free again. That's gonna be it for this video. Thank you for 1,000 views on my previous video. If you want to support me, like, comment, and subscribe, and peace.